Well, I've been getting some inquiries on what I've been doing with the cab over, so I thought it was time for a little bit of an update. Over the summer, I really haven't done a whole lot. I've been enjoying driving this thing around too much, but there was a car show about 2 weeks ago that I was planning on going to, and of course the truck didn't start. Diving into it a little bit, the generator went bad on this thing, so rather than worry about replacing it right now, since it's almost winter time, I figured now's a good time to start on the axle upgrades. So if you've been watching, I said I found axles out of an Oshkosh chassis motorhome. So last week, just for mock-up purposes, I decided to put the rear axle in the truck. Again, the rear axle is a Dana 80, disc brakes, and came out of a diesel pusher. So the axle, the pinion was pointed backwards. I had to flip that over the other way. I changed the yoke on the pinion so that it matched the U-joints on my existing drive shaft. I didn't have any problems with this install, but depending upon if somebody wants to do what I'm doing, there's a couple things I'm going to put out there just for informational purposes. Let me show you what I have done. There's the Dana 80 sitting in there. It's just sitting on the leaf springs. The axle seats are just tack welded in place. Get a light so it's a little easier to see. Because the pinion distance is larger than the Eaton 2-speed, this axle is actually not sitting on the leaf spring locator pins. It's actually back about 1.5 inches. For me, it doesn't matter because the leaf springs will be coming out and this will be getting a 4-link and airbags for the ride. If you're planning on trying to copy what I did but want to leave the leaf springs, let me point out some things. There's the caliper. As you'll notice right here, there's only about 3/8 of an inch between the leaf spring and the caliper. Where my finger's at is right where the bleeder goes. So obviously you would have to have lift blocks on this to get the leaf springs above the caliper, or another option, the bracket for the caliper is actually indexable. When I took this axle out, the caliper was actually on the pinion side of the axle. I flipped the brackets from side to side to rotate the caliper to the rear. Being that it's indexable, a person could rotate the whole assembly down one more bolt circle. There's 6 bolts that hold it on, so you could clock it down. If you were going to do that, you'll notice the U-bolts would probably be in the way of the caliper. I think if you flipped the U-bolts and put the saddle on top of the springs and ran the U-bolts around the axle, you would have plenty of clearance. Again, this is no bearing on what I'm doing since it's going to be 4-linked. There'll be nothing behind the axle except the airbag, and the airbags are going to sit more in this area. When I said I swapped the pinion This truck has 1430 series U joints, all original. I did not want to cut my drive shafts. I have no bed for this yet and still haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do. So the wheelbase didn't really matter. So that's why I moved the axle backwards about 1.5 inches so that I did not have to cut my drive shafts, and still left me plenty of slop in the slide joint at the carrier bearing. Disc brakes on the rear axle, emergency brake. This does not have the emergency brake set up on the rear axle. I'm leaving the e-brake on the tail shaft of the transmission. Again, all this is just setting in here. My plan is to get the front axle installed in the next couple of weeks so that I can see exactly where everything is and start finishing up my designs on all my 4-link brackets and decide exactly what I'm going to do with the front axle to air ride it, since it is staying a straight axle. I have some thoughts. I think what I'm going to do is a little unconventional, but until I draw it up and see how it looks, I'm not going to say what that is. So that's where we're at right now. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, like I said, I'll get the front axle in, then I can start remeasuring everything, make sure the rear axle is set where I want. It pretty much is. I spent 3 hours measuring, remeasuring, bisecting, making sure it's centered left to right in the frame, checking the wheelbase off the front axle. So I'm pretty sure it's exactly where it's going to go. I do not want to Z this frame. I'm not planning on trying to put this on the ground. I mostly am doing the air ride for better ride quality. I still plan on using this as a truck. I plan on pulling my gooseneck trailer with it. And so the airbags are just for ride. It'll drop a little bit, but not a whole lot. This frame, being that this truck only had 42,000 miles original on it and it came from out west, the frame on this truck is perfect, and I do not want to cut it up. So hopefully I don't have to Z it or C-notch it or anything like that. That'll be determined all based off where the front axle lies when it's aired down. The rear end will come off, the rear height will come off of that. But for those that have been asking, that's where we're at right now. Just everything just mocked up temporary. I could still pull it in and out of the garage. It's drivable to that extent. Hopefully pretty soon I'll start get some time to do some other stuff. I was retired. I went back to work part-time at my local Napa, which I will tell anybody that's working on these older trucks, especially these medium duties, Napa has access to a lot of the parts. I've been pretty lucky and able to find everything for these updated axles, and even for the original axles that were in this, the original drum brakes. You can still get the hardware kits, wheel cylinders. The only thing you can't get, they're not available, is the drums and the shoes. Maybe later on I might sell. I actually pulled the drums and the backing plate and all off the old Eaton axle. I might sell those down the road because it actually had fairly new relined shoes on it, new wheel cylinders on one side, but not the other. Another reason I did it, because the one wheel cylinder was leaking, and the drums are actually in really good shape. They're not chewed up. I think if somebody could turn them, just do a quick dressing on them, they'd be like new again. There's still a ton of life left in them. Again, truck only had 42,000 miles on it. But that's where we're at. So stay tuned. Hopefully I can start getting some of this other stuff done, get some time. It's fall time, so yard work has to come first. Got lots of things to do around the house. So this is just filler work right now. But so keep an eye out. My goal is by the end of winter, by the time this thing comes out next spring, this entire truck's going to be on air ride with all the front rear axle, straight axle, still the original 6x8 3/4 bud wheel pattern, since that's still going to look original. And with the generator being bad, I'm probably going to do a full harness upgrade and go to a G3 Ford 1 alternator, internal regulated. Get rid of that 30 amp generator. Just make it all modern, because I plan this truck as a driver. I drive it to work quite a bit, drive it around to the local shows. This axle will actually let me drive it a little bit more, since I'm going from 881 gears all the way down to 331 gears. So this thing should actually do highway speeds now, which that'll be pretty nice. That way I'm not irritating the other drivers, since before I could 32 miles an hour was about all this truck would do. So stay tuned. I'll try to update a little bit more as things go. Appreciate you watching.